This technique lets you stack unmixable drum samples without overmixing the life out of your track. Have you ever had this problem? You've got a great drum sample that just sounds perfect on its own. In the context of the beat, however, it's missing something. So you say, okay, I'll replace this with another sample. This other snare sample sounds great, but in the context of the beat, that's missing something too. What if you stack the two? Now there's too much going on and these two samples don't really play together nicely. I know, I'll EQ these snares to fix the frequency masking problem so that they can blend together more nicely. So then you go through and you boost some frequencies and you reduce other frequencies, pull out resonances, but before you know it, both snares have totally lost all their personality. Bummer. Okay, so maybe EQ isn't the problem, maybe it's dynamics. Maybe a compressor will get them to blend. But then after all your compressor moves, both of the snares just sound flubby and lifeless and flat. The truth is, most drum samples are already meticulously EQ'd, compressed, and even limited. Adjusting the frequency or dynamics of samples can work sometimes in your mix, of course, but sometimes it just doesn't do it, and it actually makes things sound worse. But there's a whole other dimension that we sometimes ignore when we're mixing, and that's the time dimension. Time after time. So let's try to blend these snare samples by carving out room for each one across the time dimension, rather than across the frequency or dynamic dimension. Now you may be familiar with plugins called Transient Shapers, which do this very thing. These can be really helpful, especially when working with loops with like varying audio information, right? But for just a single snare hit like this, we don't even need to use a plugin. We can just use the fades. So snare number 1 is roomy and clappy with a nice long tail, but it kind of lacks some punch. Snare number 2 is quite punchy, but it's quite dry as well, and it's a little bit mid-rangey, so it doesn't really have that bright crack to it. Snare number 3 is trappy, bright, and tight. So what if we let each snare do what it does best, and don't ask it to do what it doesn't do best? Life lesson alert. Let's draw a fade on snare number 1 that allows room for the punch of snare number 2 to come through. Click and drag on the fade square on the upper left-hand side of the snare sample and drag it over. Make sure you use your ears to make this adjustment rather than your eyes, by the way, because you want it to sound musical and natural. Don't just use the divisions of the bar to try to plan out when it should come back in, right? Use your ears instead. It almost sounds like a slapback. Pretty cool. Now let's look at snare number 2. Do we need all of the tail of the snare? Remember, we're getting a lot of the tail from snare number 1. Let's shorten the sample and let's create a fade on the end of the snare sample. Now we're leaving a bit more room for snare number 1's roomy tail to come through. What about that feisty snare number 3? What are we going to do with that? I miss its brightness when it's not in the mix. However, we have enough of the punch from snare number 2 on that downbeat. Maybe what we could do is add a little pre-shift to this transient. So slide snare number 3 slightly behind the beat and reduce the attack just a little bit. We don't want to flam on this beat. We just want a little bit of a ramp into the hit of snare number 2. And just like that, we've gotten these 3 troublesome snare samples to play together way more musically without using any compression or any EQ. Let's compare the raw stacks of the samples with this new mix. Let's compare the raw stacks of the samples. By the way, look at the way the faders are responding in the session view. You can see that not everything is hitting right on that transient. And in the raw mix, we're clipping on the master. In the new mix, we're not clipping. And I didn't change the volume of any of the clips or tracks. This is all because of the shape of the transients using the fades. This technique lets you stack unmixable drum samples without over-mixing the life out of your track. How about a little bit of extra credit for you overachievers out there? Take a little bit of the tail of snare number 1, reverse it, and put it right before the last hit of snare number 2 in this beat. This creates a little reverse into that last hit, but with a different snare, so it has a different timbre and a different feel to it. You can use the fades and clip volume to adjust this to your taste too.
Am I still streaming?
Thanks so much for watching. If you got any value out of this video, I would really love it if you gave it a thumbs up. You can subscribe by clicking right here. And here's another video about a mixing trick that should probably be illegal. It's so sneaky.